Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, the House Ethics Committee fails to reach agreement on releasing the findings of their investigation of former Congressman and nominee for Attorney General Matt Gaetz.
Donald Trump picks former pro wrestling executive Linda McMahon to lead the Department of Education, what she's likely to prioritize at the agency Trump pledged to eliminate.
And we report from Haiti on how sweeping gang violence has devastated daily life.
I am crying because I can't live in this misery. I don't have milk for my little one. Now the children are suffering. Sometimes I can't even feed them.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
Consumer Cellular. This is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket.
Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular,
You get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing.
have a nice day.
A successful business owner sells his company and restores his father's historic jazz club with his son. A Raymond James financial advisor gets to know you, your passions, and the way you bring people together. Life well planned.
the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation, upholding freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad. The Walton Family Foundation, working for solutions to protect water during climate change so people and nature can thrive together. Supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Another key nomination made today by President-elect Donald Trump as questions and concerns continue to swirl around others. Mr. Trump today announced Matthew Whitaker as his pick to be ambassador to NATO. Whitaker briefly served as acting attorney general during Trump's first term.
Meantime, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, along with Mr. Trump's controversial pick for Attorney General, former Congressman Matt Gaetz, met with Republican senators on Capitol Hill today. The meetings come amid mounting pressure on the House Ethics Committee to release a report looking into several allegations against Gaetz, including sexual misconduct. NPR congressional reporter Claudia Grisales joins us now from the Capitol. Claudia, it's good to see you. So the House Ethics Committee said that they did not reach an agreement as to whether to release their report looking into these allegations against the congressman. Bring us up to speed and help us understand what the pressure points are.
Right. Essentially, what it boils down to is a partisan divide at this moment on the House Ethics Committee. We saw the chairman, Representative Guest, come out and say no agreement was reached. But we saw a very angry Susan Wild, this is the outgoing representative from Pennsylvania, say that didn't entirely represent what went down in that room. And she felt betrayed by his remarks. Basically, reading between the lines, they were deadlocked. And talking to a Republican source this evening who's familiar with their thinking on the panel, Republicans' concerns were the report is not finished and there's no precedent to release an unfinished report for the panel.
We should say there's so much focus on this House Ethics panel report because the Trump transition team has not signed an agreement with the Justice Department that would allow the FBI to vet his nominees, upending some 60 years of precedent. That said, you have Democrats, Senate Democrats, who've written a letter to the FBI asking for the complete file of the FBI's prior investigation into Matt Gaetz. Help us understand what's happening there.
Right. There are a lot of forces here at play. A lot of people want to get their hands on that report. Even Senate Republicans want to see what is in that ethics report. Talked to Senator Cornyn of Texas after meeting with Matt Gaetz today, who was here at the Capitol. And he continues to maintain that they need to learn more about what is going on with Gaetz's background and all of these claims. At the same time, he said he assured Gaetz that this is just the beginning of the process. Everyone deserves a fair shake. So when we look at Senate Democrats, they're especially interested in getting that background. And we see it on the House side as well. House Democrats are moving forward for a privileged vote to try and force this on the House floor, see if a vote could force the release of this report. Meanwhile, ethics is supposed to meet again on December 5th.
As Vice President-elect J.D. Vance took Matt Gaetz around the Senate this afternoon and met with those Senate Republicans trying to build support, based on your reporting, how did those meetings go? Were they persuasive?
You know, it's pretty clear that no one, in terms of those who have raised concerns like Cornyn and other members who sit on the Judiciary Committee who would be very involved in this process, they haven't signaled this is a done deal at all. They're just saying we need to let the president-elect have a fair shake at his nominees and have those nominees get a fair shake as well. So it's just the very beginning, but there's already a lot of focus on this and concerns in terms of how nominations like Gaetz can move forward.
Yeah. And my final question to you, Claudia, is a big picture one, because Donald Trump is nominating the very types of people that he said he would when he was a candidate, people whom he knows well, people who are loyal to him, people who would potentially disrupt and dismantle the parts of the government that he views as suspect. And in the case of folks like Dr. Mehmet Oz, Pete Hegseth, even Matt Gaetz, people whom Mr. Trump views as effective communicators on television. Do you see it that way? And how are these nominations generally landing with Senate Republicans?
Right. He is going with what he promised in terms of what he wanted to see and the people he wanted to see make the kind of changes he envisions for all of our government agencies. And so it's making a reality, his campaign promises, in terms of shaking up Washington. There's definitely a lot of shaking going on here right now, but there's also concerns in terms of the Pentagon and the concerns with that nominee to lead the next leader of the Pentagon, as well as, of course, Gaetz, as we've talked about, and Dr. Oz in terms of what kind of changes they could install, in addition to others such as Tulsi Gabbard and concerns about intelligence that I'm hearing about from even Republicans.
Claudia Grisales of NPR, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, as Claudia referenced, the Ethics Committee largely operates in secret. Democrats and Republicans are always equally represented on the panel, with 5 apiece, regardless of which party's in power. They conduct their work and investigations entirely behind closed doors, without public notice, and generally avoid sharing details outside of finalized published reports. But this investigation and its potential to upend the nomination of former Congressman Matt Gaetz is straining those norms. House Speaker Mike Johnson has called for the report to be buried, while Senate Democrats are looking into whether or not they can subpoena it. Representative Mark DeSaulnier of California was in the room today, one of the 5 Democratic members on the committee, and he joins us now. Congressman, thanks for being with us. Welcome to the NewsHour.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So as Claudia just reported there, your Democratic colleague on the committee, Susan Wild, came out and confirmed there was a vote, that committee members disagreed over whether to release the report. We're reading between the lines here. Can you confirm that it was a deadlock vote, that Republicans voted to not release and Democrats voted to release it?
Unfortunately, I cannot. The rules of the House Ethics Committee is that I can't talk to you about anything that happened in the room, and that is deferred to the ranking member and the chair. I can talk to you generally about what I think is happening here, which we're trying to work through consensus, as we always do in the Ethics Committee, as you said, 5-5, but the Republicans, being in the majority, have the chairmanship. So we're trying to work through it, and I have faith, and have before today and after today, that we will ultimately get to a point of transparency, not as quickly as I would like and my colleagues would like, but I have faith that we're going to get to where we need to go. The Senate, in an advisory consent role, needs to have all the information available to them before someone is nominated to Attorney General.
Well, Congresswoman Wild also said the committee is going to meet again in 2 weeks on December 5th. So what happens then, and what happens between now and then that you think could break the impasse?
Well, there's some question about, as was reported earlier, about whether the report's done or not. There's a difference of opinion has been publicly expressed by the ranking member and the chair of whether it's done or not. I support releasing it, but if there's more work to be done and there's a disagreement about process, I'm okay with that. We take a little bit longer to get consensus as to what the next step will be, and in my view, that should be releasing the information.
So can I take that to mean that you believe the report is done? There's actually disagreement on the committee about whether or not the report is finished?
I believed it was done. Mr. Gates has been under investigation for some time by the Ethics Committee on a consensus basis about his role as a member of Congress. The only thing that's different about this is everyone before who didn't have the report released to the public resigned and wasn't nominated and never went on to serve in public office again. What makes this different is he has been nominated for Attorney General of the United States.
What's at stake here, as you mentioned, is just this, that there's an incoming president's nomination for the next Attorney General. It's an incredibly consequential and powerful post. Just a couple of hours ago, you were asked about this, and you said the scope and the scale and the danger to this is higher than anything I've ever lived through. What did you mean by that?
What I meant by that is this Attorney General of the United States in a time in our country's history where there's very little trust in the Congress. I feel very strongly that our ultimate message or job here in the Ethics Committee is to keep an eye on the public's trust in the institution, and specifically in this instance on the 10 members on the Committee on Ethics.
Your committee's been looking into this since May of 2023. I guess the question is, at this point, if you're at a deadlock and it doesn't seem like there will be a break in that impasse, to have worked on this for 18 months and not have a report to show for it, does that cause a lot of people to question both the relevancy but also the potency of this committee itself?
You know, I liken the Ethics Committee in many ways to a grand jury. We're not meeting in secret. We're meeting in secret in the context of those are the rules, and there's good reasons for those rules. But the process is different because our times are different. The process was different because of the outcome of the election, to be honest. And the winner of that election, Mr. Trump, to pick this person who happened to be under investigation as a House member. So to me, that's the issue. And ultimately, the issue, as I said again, is the trust by Republican and Democrats in the institution. I'm talking about average voters. They don't trust us now, and it's really important for us on the Ethics Committee, I think, to rise to the occasion and make sure we're honest and open with the American public, accepting the fact that we have a different perspective.
That is Congressman Mark DeSaulnier of California, member of the House Ethics Committee, joining us tonight. Congressman, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
President-elect Donald Trump's pick of Linda McMahon as the next Secretary of Education is already raising alarm among critics who feel the role should go to someone with more experience in education. But her appointment has also been met with praise by supporters who see this as a win for parental rights and school choice. The former professional wrestling executive led the Small Business Administration during Trump's first term before she resigned in 2019. This time around, she's set to head an agency that Trump has repeatedly pledged to dismantle. For more, we're joined by John Vallant, director of the Brown Center on Education Policy at the Brookings Institution. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I think it's always useful to look at these selections in the context of what Mr. Trump has said about these respective departments and agencies. So help us understand Linda McMahon as his choice to lead a department that he says he wants to get rid of and allow each state to handle education individually, as he put it.
So there's an irony to selecting a secretary of a department that the incoming administration is looking to dismantle from everything that they've told us. Now, they are very unlikely to actually be able to do that because eliminating the Department of Education would require an act of Congress. It would be subject to a Senate filibuster, and there is no Democratic support for that idea, and there very likely would be some Republican opposition too. So I don't think that they're thinking in terms of how do we eliminate the department with this pick. But it is also the case that Linda McMahon has very little experience and expertise in education. She has more experience running agencies and working in the first Trump administration, but is not one who seems to really understand the issues of the day when it comes to education policy.
It strikes me that students with disabilities and their families in particular would experience the ripple effects if the administration really does make good on its promise to reduce the federal government's role in public education.
So when people talk about eliminating the Department of Education, it's important to ask what they mean. And if when they're talking about that, they're talking about eliminating the department and eliminating all of the programs that the department administers, it would be catastrophic for all kinds of student populations. So students with disabilities are certainly one. They receive protections from legislation and they receive resources. Students who live in poverty are another. They receive resources that they really need. Now, the Trump administration can't just come in and do that. And in fact, those programs are hardwired into legislation that predates the Department of Education. Part of the reason we have a Department of Education is that they administer those programs, and we were sort of getting a lot of programs that we needed someone to administer. So it would absolutely be catastrophic if we were to go in that direction. I'm very skeptical. Not only because there would be a Democratic opposition, but students with disabilities and students in poverty, they don't just live in blue states and in blue areas. They live all across the country. And there are a lot of Republican members of Congress who are very sensitive to the impacts that that kind of move would have on their own constituents.
Linda McMahon supports school choice. The Trump campaign and Republicans broadly have talked about restoring parental rights in schools, cutting federal funding for programs teaching critical race theory, gender ideology, any really lesson deemed inappropriate. There's also this push to restore what Republicans, many conservatives, see as the fundamental right to pray in school. At the heart of it, though, is this fundamental disagreement about the role of public education. Is that how you see it?
It is. And in fact, I think it's actually easier to understand the attacks on the Department of Education as being an attack on a symbol of public education more generally. And maybe the most important policy trend that we've seen around the country when it comes to K-12 education is that in a lot of states, and it's red states and a couple of purple states, they have pushed toward what are essentially universal school voucher programs. And the way those programs are designed, they're very different from the voucher programs of the past in that they're available to all families regardless of income and really don't have many restrictions at all, either on the families using those vouchers or on the schools that are receiving the vouchers. And so what I think we're really seeing is we're seeing a push from the Republican Party and from the Trump administration away from public schools and into private schools, whether they're religious or not.
How have the culture wars broadly affected public education, and how do you see it evolving in a second Trump term?
So it's been a really difficult few years for schools across the country, and it started really or ramped up with the COVID-induced school closings. And after those COVID-induced school closings, we did have this wave of culture war battles, especially related to gender and to race. And at minimum, it has been incredibly distracting when we really have had to focus on what are big issues for schools. So even today, we haven't nearly recovered all of the lost learning that happened as a result of those school closings. And then on top of that, we have issues with chronic absenteeism. We have issues with politics infiltrating schools, and it really is a bad time. But in addition to that, it's not just a distraction, but often there are students who feel targeted by a lot of these culture war battles. So if you're a transgender student in schools right now, you're hearing the messages and you're seeing those TV advertisements that we saw throughout the campaign. And so there's very likely a direct impact in addition to just the sort of more general unhelpful distraction.
Is there a connection between federal spending, federal involvement in schooling, and student outcomes?
So the federal government is a relatively small player when it comes to funding our schools. It puts about 10% of funding into our school system. And the funds that it puts go highly disproportionately into the areas in greatest need. So if we were to rely entirely on state and local sources of funding, we would have an education system that vastly overfunds the wealthiest areas. And part of the goal of the federal role in funding schools is to offset some of that inequality. And what we know from a lot of research at this point is that when we put resources into schools, and particularly when we put resources into schools that serve students in poverty, it has real benefits both for those students and for society at large.
John Vallant with the Brown Center on Education Policy at the Brookings Institution. Thanks for your insights. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
The day's other headlines start in the Pacific Northwest. Communities are cleaning up after a so-called bomb cyclone unleashed torrents of rain and fierce winds overnight, killing at least 2 people. Authorities in the Seattle area responded as trees smashed into cars and toppled power lines. More than 500,000 homes and businesses were without electricity as of this morning. Forecasters say there's a risk of excessive rainfall from Washington state to Northern California through at least Friday. Climate change is making hurricanes notably stronger. That's according to a new study published in the journal Environmental Research Climate. Researchers studied 40 Atlantic hurricanes over a period of 6 years and found them to be 18 miles per hour stronger than if climate change had not been a factor. In real-life terms, that's the difference between a Category 2 hurricane and a Category 3. Warmer oceans were cited as the primary cause. Today's findings add to other studies that say climate change has made hurricanes intensify quicker and move more slowly. The Biden administration has given Ukraine a green light to use American-supplied anti-personnel landmines. That's on top of the anti-tank mines it already provides. It's the second major policy shift in as many days after the U.S. agreed to let Ukraine strike deeper inside Russia with U.S. missiles. Anti-personnel landmines are often criticized by human rights groups because they can endanger citizens long after conflicts end. But Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the American versions would be safer because they would deactivate over time. Speaking today in Laos, Secretary Austin explained why they're needed on the battlefield.
Because the Russians have been so unsuccessful in the way that they have been fighting, they've kind of changed their tactics a bit, and they don't lead with their mechanized forces anymore. So that's what the Ukrainians are seeing right now. And they have a need for things that can help slow down that effort on the part of the Russians.
Meantime, the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv was shut today amid warnings of a significant Russian strike on the Ukrainian capital. This afternoon, the State Department said it's expected to reopen the facility tomorrow and resume normal operations. The United States has vetoed a UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. It's the 4th time the U.S. has blocked such an effort since the onset of the war more than a year ago. Deputy UN Ambassador Robert Wood said the U.S. could not support the measure because it did not link the ceasefire to the release of hostages held by Hamas.
These 2 urgent goals are inextricably linked. This resolution abandoned that necessity, and for that reason, the United States could not support it. Simply put, this resolution would have sent a dangerous message to Hamas. There's no need to come back to the negotiating table.
As the council met today, Israeli airstrikes killed some 15 people across the Gaza Strip. One attack hit this school where displaced Palestinians had been sheltering. Hospital officials say 2 women and a child were among the dead. Meantime, in nearby Syria, state-run media says that an Israeli airstrike killed 36 people in the historic town of Palmyra. The Israeli military declined to comment on the reported strike. While in Lebanon, U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein wrapped up 2 days of ceasefire talks with Hezbollah and signaled signs of progress. He now heads to Israel, where he'll meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow. A Venezuelan man was convicted today of killing Georgia nursing student Laken Riley. Jose Ibarra was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The 26-year-old was found guilty on 10 counts, including murder, aggravated battery, and kidnapping with bodily injury. The case was a flashpoint in the national debate over immigration in the lead-up to the U.S. elections. Ibarra entered the U.S. illegally in 2022 and was allowed to stay in the country while he pursued his immigration case. Comcast is planning to spin off most of its cable networks into a separate publicly traded company as it shifts its focus towards streaming and other revenue sources. The new entity would house some of the company's best-known brands, including MSNBC, CNBC, and the USA Network, among others. But it will keep its Peacock streaming service, as well as Bravo, which generates a lot of its streaming content. It'll also hold on to NBC Universal properties like NBC News, NBC Sports, and Universal Studios. Comcast says the change, if approved, will take about a year to complete. U.S. wildlife officials are trying to protect the world's tallest animal. A new proposal from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service would classify 3 populations of giraffes as endangered. Giraffes, of course, are not native to the U.S., but officials hope the move will reduce poaching of the animal in Africa by restricting imports here. That includes giraffe body parts and products like rugs, jewelry, and shoes. The Giraffe Conservation Foundation says there are only about 117,000 such animals worldwide, and that's down about 30% from the 1980s. On Wall Street today, stocks drifted a bit, with the major markets ending mixed. The Dow Jones Industrial Average added nearly 140 points, or about 1/3 of 1%. The Nasdaq slipped around 20 points on the day, and the S&P 500 added less than a point, so virtually flat. And President Biden turned 82 years old today, the first sitting U.S. president to ever hit that milestone. Family, friends, and colleagues, past and present, paid tribute on social media, including Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Barack Obama. The previous record holder for oldest sitting commander-in-chief was President Reagan, who was 77 years old when he finished his second term. Still to come on the NewsHour, transgender Americans share their concerns about the incoming administration's threats to roll back their rights. And an annual festival celebrates the music and poetry of the late Leonard Cohen.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein Studio at WETA in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
We're going to take a closer look now at gang warfare in Haiti, which has rocked the struggling nation for years, displacing over 700,000 Haitians. The United Nations Security Council met today to discuss the violence and whether to upgrade a police mission deployed earlier this year to a peacekeeping operation, as the chaos and street warfare has reached a new and terrible level. Despite that multinational security mission that deployed in June to try and restore some order, large parts of the capital remain under gang control, and violence is endemic. Special correspondent Marcia Biggs and videographer Eric O'Connor recently traveled to Haiti and have this look at the depth of the crisis.
Downtown Port-au-Prince, deserted after years of gang warfare. 85% of the city is held by various armed groups, constantly battling for control. They terrorize contested neighborhoods with a scorched earth practice of kidnapping, rape, and murder. No one in the city remains untouched.
I had no choice but to join them. In order to stay alive, to save the life of my child, and also avenge my mother and father.
This 41-year-old widowed mother asked us to protect her identity. She says in 2020 she was living on a front line between 2 gang territories when bandits attacked her home and murdered her father, her mother, and her husband in front of her. She fled with her teenage son, and members of the Grand Ravine gang gave her a choice.
They asked those who want to stand and fight to fight. I chose to join with my child.
How do you survive?
When a vehicle with goods is passing by, we hijack it, or we kidnap you. We demand a ransom. You pay us, and we release you. But if you refuse, I have to kill you to take what you have.
Have you ever killed anyone?
Many times.
And how does that feel?
You forced me to kill you. I asked you for something and you didn't give it to me. I've gotten used to it. It's nothing for me now.
What was it like the first time?
Well, I couldn't sleep for 3 to 4 weeks. But now that I've gotten used to it, it's like a game for me to kill you.
It's been nearly 5 months since a Kenyan-led UN multinational security support mission arrived to reestablish security in Haiti. It's a force meant to be made up of 2,500 security officers from various countries. But the mission is critically underfinanced, and so far only around 400 have been deployed. Still, Force Commander Godfrey Otunge maintains that they have made huge strides with the little that they have.
We pacified the airport. Outside the airport, there's this road. When we came here, people were not using it. As it is currently, it's full of traffic. We've gone to downtown.
But downtown is a no-go zone.
It is a no-go zone to the people that didn't see the way it was before we came.
We went out on patrol with Kenyan forces to check out some of those no-go zones, areas still under gang control.
We pacified this road, especially this road that runs from this junction to the U.S. Embassy. It was not possible because of the threats of the gangs. Now we need to pacify and now dominate those areas.
We passed the U.S. Embassy, whose staff can only come and go with armored cars, and where the U.S. ambassador admits to having limited contact with gangs to ensure their security. Gang members try to slow the patrol with roadblocks and burning tires, but Kenyan forces remain resolute in their mission.
What do you say to those who are holding back the resources, who are dragging their feet about getting you what you need?
This is the time for action. Because whatever voluntary contribution they put into the trust fund is what propels this operation. So once we get all those in terms of air support, maritime capability, personnel, the equipment that we requested, it will be fireworks because I know where I want to go. I know where I started, I know where I am, and I know where I want to go.
One place the mission still hasn't gone is Cité Soleil, where gangs were born decades ago. We were able to access it with the nonprofit organization Way to Health, which provides medical care and food to children there with the tacit permission of the GPEP gang.
We're in a tap-tap, which is basically a pickup truck that's covered. It's a lot safer for us to be in a tap-tap than to be in our own car because members of the GPEP gang know this tap-tap.
We crossed the front line between the G9 and GPEP gangs, nicknamed the Death Crossroads. Last year, G9 blocked all other roads to the GPEP territory and raped or murdered anyone who tried to get out. Once in GPEP territory, we switched to motorcycles because a river of sewage and garbage makes the road impassable for cars. A physical reminder to all how forgotten this neighborhood is. We arrive at Way to Health's makeshift clinic for sick, malnourished children and their mothers, victims of poverty and non-existent health care. This baby likely has typhoid. Her mother was killed, so she's being cared for by her aunt, who says she does the best she can.
Sometimes when the baby cries, I don't have enough money to feed her, so I beg in the street. We sleep in the public square.
The people here are really struggling. They say they have no services, no electricity, no water, no schools, no hospitals. This area has been attacked many, many times. Everyone here has been a victim.
At every turn are footprints of homes burned down, now marked by string. Bullet holes puncture all remaining facades. Remnants of horrific battles that took place between G9 and GPEP.
I lost 2 brothers during the war. We found the body of one of them, the other one was burned. People had no choice but to try to escape in the ocean. But many people died because they didn't know how to swim. Many children died that day.
During one of those attacks, 7 men stormed into Pierre-Aline Jules' home. She was raped along with her mother and her niece.
They had balaclavas. They were hooded. I could only see their eyes. I was really sad. I was crying a lot. But thank God they didn't kill me.
When she showed up at the Way to Health clinic last year, she was a shell of herself.
I kept this as a secret with my family, and I am telling you. I didn't tell anyone else what happened to me.
But maybe the same thing has happened to your friends.
Yes, some friends of mine were also raped. I don't talk about my problems to my friends. I'm a woman with a lot of secrets.
Nearby, children play where the river of sewage empties into the ocean. Most of the homes burned down have never been rebuilt. Those families now sleep in the street. Over 700,000 people in Haiti are now homeless because of gang violence. Without any formal camps set up to house those displaced, many of them have begun taking shelter in schools across Port-au-Prince. They are desperate for food. With no running water or soap, disease and pests run rampant. The children are eaten alive by bedbugs at night. Most of the women we talked to had been raped. Some are now pregnant. Macrecia Athos lost her husband when gangs attacked her home last year. She and her 4 children now sleep in this former classroom with 46 other people every night.
I am crying because I can't live in this misery. I don't have milk for my little one can of milk. I used to be able to find a can of milk. Now the children are suffering. Sometimes I can't even feed them.
A couple of months ago, she went back to check on her home, only to find it still occupied by bandits. They raped and beat her for 6 hours before letting her go.
Does it bother you that members of your gang may be raping women?
No, because the other gangs came to our territory and did it to us. They take a 7, 8-year-old child and rape her. It will never bother me. You made me cry, I'll make you cry too.
What could the state do to end the violence?
The state should start with their high-ranking officials first, because they are the ones who set it up. We don't take the streets of our own free will. Where do we get the weapons? How can I buy a Kalashnikov? How do I buy an M16? No, they must start with themselves first, before that could change. As long as they bring us weapons, we will take them.
What do you see in your future for you and your son?
We will not surrender ourselves to the state. If we fall together. If we survive together.
In a state incapable or unwilling to combat such brutal resolve, violence begets more violence. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Marcia Biggs in Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
President-elect Donald Trump made rolling back transgender rights a key issue in his campaign. Republicans spent more than $200 million on ads targeting trans individuals, while Trump himself promised to limit access to gender-affirming health care and to prevent trans athletes from participating in school sports. Here's Trump back in February of 2023.
I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. I will then ask Congress to permanently stop federal taxpayer dollars from being used to promote or pay for these procedures and pass a law prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states.
His election has communities of trans people and their allies fearful of widespread discrimination and a loss of health care access. Polls show that more than 60% of Americans support protecting transgender people from discrimination. But they've also found that 55% believe support for trans rights has, quote, gone too far. We spoke with 3 Americans, a parent of a trans daughter, the executive director of a trans crisis hotline, and a two-spirit activist and parent to a two-spirit kid. That's a term used by Indigenous people that acknowledges the diverse nature of gender and sexuality.
I'm Sarah Adams. I am a proud Choctaw person. I live in Oklahoma, and I'm two-spirit.
My name is Beth. I am a parent of a trans child.
Hi, my name is Kai. My pronouns are he, they. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm the executive director at Trans Lifeline, a grassroots nonprofit that supports trans people in crisis all across America.
There's an overwhelming sense of fear. we've had lots of conversations about the need for access to health care, to gender affirming care. I work primarily with youth, and so that is a big concern. Safety in schools is a huge thing.
We saw over 800% calls increased on that day, the day of the election results. That was a very sobering number.
I mean, I think that there's a portion of Americans out there that just don't want to learn and stay ignorant whenever it comes to gender. They are very black and white whenever they're like, there's only boys and girls.
We're scrambling to find resources and trying to figure out a way to maintain access to very basic services, much less, services to thrive, right? It's about survival right now.
We continue to be told that our bodies are not ours, that we don't get the right to decide how we exist in our own bodies. No matter how much we fight for people to see us as human, we are constantly up against this idea that trans people are not human.
Raising a trans child is such a joy. She has taught me so much about the human soul and how to love and loving unconditionally and not judging a book. And she's just funny and smart. She's a normal kid. But I tell you, this is not normal parenting. I have to vet anyone, like dance studios, hairdressers. I want to ensure that my child is going to be around safe people.
I carry the weight of these kids with me, of their well-being, of their struggles. And I don't take that lightly. We have a responsibility to them. Some of the things that are being spoken about what will happen with this Trump presidency, with gender affirming care not being available for anyone. I think for a lot of them, they were thinking, well, 18, that's the magic age, right? When I get to that age, when I get there, then this whole world will open up to what is available to me. And then when the thought of that light at the end of the tunnel goes out, that can create this vacuum for hope.
I think that my biggest fear is that we won't reach the people that need us the most in times like this, to remind them that there are trans people that believe that they deserve to live, that we are happy that they're alive.
It is hard to hate up close. If you met my children, you would want to protect them too. They're children.
We're joined now by Orion Rumler, LGBTQ+ reporter for the 19th, to break down the potential impacts of all of these policy promises. Orion, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Amna.
So you heard a lot of the fear in some folks' voices there about what's to come. What can we expect from a second Trump presidency when it comes to the rights of trans individuals?
What we can expect in terms of what's easiest for the administration to accomplish on its own is restricting federal funding, as in Medicaid and Medicare, to hospitals performing gender-affirming care for trans youth. That's a specific promise from the Trump campaign. He's made other suggestions that would expand to other ages, such as asking the Justice Department to, quote, investigate Big Pharma about providing gender-affirming care. And that promise it wasn't limited to just youth. So I would expect the restrictions most immediately for Medicaid and Medicare for youth, but it remains to be seen how this would apply to adults as well in terms of investigating all hospitals giving this care.
He's also talked about proposing a national ban on gender-affirming surgery for minors, cutting off federal funding to health providers who offer that care. What would that mean in practice for anyone seeking that health care?
In practice, if the administration did go ahead and pull federal funding to hospitals receiving Medicaid and Medicare, that would just restrict access to trans youth trying to get puberty blockers, hormone replacement therapy. That would just restrict their access, and it's something we've already been seeing in 26 states throughout the country. So in a way, this is an environment that a lot of trans youth are already living in. But what I would be interested to see is how a national ban would play out in states that have put forth protections for trans youth, like in California.
There's also these specific rollbacks that he's talked about, protections for transgender students in particular, and dealing with the education system. When it comes to participation in sports, what have we heard from the incoming president?
Right, so he would reverse the Biden administration's interpretation of Title IX, which, under this administration applies to LGBTQ students, protecting them against discrimination. And the focus from the Trump campaign would be preventing trans girls from playing in girls' sports. However, because these are broad non-discrimination protections, this could implicate all LGBTQ students at schools where it can be an especially vulnerable place for trans kids and queer kids. Just if they don't have a safe environment at home, school is where they go to feel affirmed often.
There's also this proposal we've seen in which incoming President Trump has said that he would ask Congress to pass a bill to establish a rule that the only genders recognized by the U.S. government are either male or female as assigned at birth. What are the implications of a change like that, and how much support is there for legislation like that?
So that one is a broad policy statement. And the way I would read, to me, that threatens most directly the X gender marker that we've seen on passports under the Biden administration. An X marker meaning if you're non-binary, gender non-conforming, you put it on your documentation. That would also threaten rules under the Biden administration that made it easier for trans people to update the gender on their passport or Social Security. Right now, it's very easy to do that. I'm sure that would be restricted under a Trump administration.
Now, we've already seen the lone incoming trans member of Congress, Sarah McBride of Delaware, targeted by Representative Nancy Mace, who introduced a bill basically to ban Sarah McBride, basically saying any transgender woman, from using women's bathrooms on Capitol Hill. When you talk to people, are they watching what's unfolding on Capitol Hill and here in Washington, and how is that resonating with them?
Trans people are absolutely watching this, and I was struck when I was in Delaware prior to McBride's win on election night. I met a trans couple who had traveled from California to Delaware to knock on hundreds of doors for McBride, and that was a moment where I was like, oh, this is a national campaign. This is not just this isn't a state campaign, someone going to Congress for Delaware, which of course it is, but trans people across the country are watching McBride and how these politicians are treating her as she's stepping into this political space, making history amid a Congress that is likely going to be one of the most anti-trans Congresses that we've had in a while, just in terms of there's so many anti-trans bills that have been introduced but have not gone anywhere, but now Republicans have the majority in both houses, and I would expect those to move forward.
Ryan Rumler of the 19th, thank you for joining us, for sharing your reporting. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Amna.
In death, Leonard Cohen is having a rebirth. The legendary singer is being remembered by older and younger generations alike for his timeless music. Special correspondent Mike Saray went to the annual Leonard Cohen Festival recently to hear why. It's part of our Arts and Culture series, Canvas.
Yeah, I've heard that there was a secret chord that David played, and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you?
Singer, poet, lover, monk. Leonard Cohen, still very much an enigma for his longtime faithful following and a new generation of converts just now discovering him.
Hey, welcome to the San Francisco Leonard Cohen Festival. Quite the thing here. Would you like the program?
Since Leonard Cohen's death in 2016, there's been no shortage of tribute shows, music compilations, and interpretations of his work. This three-day annual San Francisco Leonard Cohen Festival features his music and his poetry by local musicians and poets, many of whom never got to experience him in life.
After Leonard passed, I think people are eager to keep his memory alive and the passion that he brought to his words and poetry and music. And And it's a little cathartic to revisit it annually.
There's so much comedy in what he says.
Clay Eugene Smith started the festival in 2018, soon after Leonard Cohen's death at age 80. He also performs in it with an a cappella men's chorus, sporting Cohen's signature fedoras and suits, whose repertoire is exclusively Leonard Cohen music. Calling themselves the Conspiracy of Beards, they've been performing at clubs around the San Francisco Bay Area for more than 2 decades.
I remember you well in the Chelsea Hotel.
They held impromptu memorial concerts at local transit stations the night Cohen died.
His passion for poetry, his words, asking questions, a little bit of religion, a little bit of politics, diving deep into those things and not having all the answers.
If you want a lover, I'll do anything you ask me to.
Their sister a cappella chorus, The Conspiracy of Venus, highlighted Cohen's collection of love songs, originating from his poetry, like most of his music did.
If I knew where the good songs came from, I'd go there more often.
I see him mainly as a poet of, lovers, a troubadour of broken hearts.
Jenny Lim came of age in the 60s and 70s, listening and performing Leonard Cohen's music as an aspiring folk singer herself. Equally inspired by Cohen's poetry, she became a poet instead, and is currently San Francisco's official poet laureate.
And you want to travel with her, and you want to travel blind, and you know that you can trust her, 'cause she's touched your perfect body with her mind. Thank you.
What makes him so special? His songs are like journals of his life. And because they're so deeply personal and intimate, they become universal because everyone can identify with his struggles, his conflicts, his love affairs, his heartbreaks, his grappling with his spirituality, and his self-criticism as a human being.
Writing songs with someone is an intimate process. You have to shed the ego, take risks. Having been invited into Leonard's Tower of Song, I got to know him well.
Sharon Robinson was a co-songwriter on Leonard Cohen's albums. She traveled with him on his first international tour, starting as a backup singer with his band, and played with him on his last. Since his death, she has created her one-woman show of Leonard Cohen's music, writings, and friendship.
Well, he was mysterious and enigmatic, but I never let him know that. I always just treated him as a regular guy. Somehow from the beginning, we had a rapport that was kind of just an automatic thing. He's said many times that he can spend years on a song. I feel very privileged to have been given these words to write music, these words that Leonard had worked on for years.
Filmmakers Dan Geller and Dana Goldfein documented the making of Hallelujah, Cohen's most popular song, for the recent film Hallelujah, Leonard Cohen, A Journey, a Song.
I think there is something about that song in particular that spans so many different considerations in Leonard's life. His philosophical and religious and sexual complications that are evoked in the song, and using it as a way into his mind.
That record album never came out in the States, did it?
No. Columbia Records refused to put it out.
Rejected by his record company, Cohen eventually self-published Hallelujah. The film also covers Cohen's 3-year sabbatical from his music career to study as a Buddhist monk, while other artists' versions of Hallelujah made it a hit and one of pop music's most copied songs.
So many different artists were covering it that
and it was showing up in generation after generation's animated films, whether it was Shrek in 2000.
And I think if you're a 20-year-old who has not found love, or a 30-year-old who has found love and challenges in relationships, or you're a 50-year-old who's dealing with the loss of a parent, or you're dealing with your own mortality, Leonard can be with you through your whole lifetime.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Mike Saray in San Francisco.
And there's a lot more online, including a look at how the amplification of violent and hateful content on Instagram fueled rising hate crimes in India. That's at pbs.org/newshour.
And be sure to join us tomorrow night when unseated Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio sits down to discuss the future of the Democratic Party. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS NewsHour, thanks for spending part of your evening with us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by...
On an American Cruise Line's journey along the Columbia and Snake Rivers, travelers retrace the route forged by Lewis and Clark more than 200 years ago. American Cruise Line's fleet of modern riverboats travel through American landscapes to historic landmarks, where you can experience local customs and cuisine. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour.
The ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation. The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.